You think you can handle me? You're pathetic.
I was hired to care for you, not to be humiliated.
What? Who do you think you are? You think you can handle this? You're pathetic.
I am here to help you, sir.
Help? I don't need your pity.
This isn't pity, it's respect.
Respect? From you?
She thought caring for a billionaire's wheelchair-bound son would be difficult, but she never expected cruelty on her first day. He mocked her, tested her, and tried to make her quit. Instead, she did something no one had dared before, leaving him stunned and forcing a decision that changed everything. Before we continue, if you believe every human being deserves dignity no matter their wealth, health, status, or circumstances, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the person who seems the hardest to love is carrying a pain no one can see, and one act of courage can change an entire life. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next powerful story of compassion, justice, and unexpected second chances. Emily Carter had been warned about Ethan Whitmore before she ever saw his face. Whatever he says, don't take it personally. Those were the first words Margaret Ellis, the grey-haired housekeeper, whispered as she led Emily through the enormous marble foyer of the Whitmore estate. Emily glanced at her. That's an interesting thing to say about someone I'm supposed to care for. Margaret gave a weary smile. You'll understand. The estate sat on 40 acres outside Greenwich, Connecticut, hidden behind iron gates and rows of perfectly trimmed trees. From the road, the mansion looked like something built for royalty rather than a family of 3. 22 bedrooms, 2 swimming pools, a private theater, an indoor gym larger than the community center Emily had grown up visiting. And somewhere inside it all was 29-year-old Ethan Whitmore, the only son of billionaire industrialist Richard Whitmore. Emily tightened her grip on the strap of her inexpensive handbag. She needed this job. That fact mattered more than the marble floors beneath her shoes or the original paintings hanging along the hallway. 3 months earlier, she had been working 12-hour shifts at a rehabilitation center in Bridgeport. She loved the patients, but the wages barely covered her rent and the medical bills her father had left behind after his death. Then the rehabilitation center cut staff. Emily had been one of 17 employees let go. For 6 weeks, she had lived on savings, instant noodles, and stubborn optimism. Then the Whitmore position appeared. Private caregiver. Live out. Excellent compensation. Medical benefits. 6-month guaranteed contract. The salary was nearly 4 times what Emily had earned before. There was only one unusual detail. The job listing had appeared 4 times in 5 months. Emily had noticed. At the interview, Richard Whitmore's personal assistant had refused to explain why. Now Margaret's warning made the answer obvious. How many caregivers has he had? Emily asked quietly. Margaret stopped walking. She hesitated. 8. In 5 months. 9 if you count the nurse who lasted until lunch. Emily raised an eyebrow. Margaret leaned closer. She threw orange juice at him. Emily almost laughed. Why? He told her she had the personality of hospital wallpaper. Emily pressed her lips together. That doesn't sound like orange juice territory. That wasn't all he said. Margaret began walking again. Emily followed. A strange heaviness settled in her stomach. At the rehabilitation center, she had cared for angry patients before. People recovering from strokes, spinal injuries, amputations, accidents. Pain could turn polite people cruel. Fear could make gentle people vicious. Loss could transform someone overnight. Emily understood that. But understanding pain did not mean volunteering to become someone's punching bag. She had learned that lesson years earlier. Her younger brother, Daniel, had taught her. When Emily was 19, Daniel was 16 and convinced he was indestructible. He played baseball, drove too fast, laughed too loudly, and insisted helmets were for people who lacked confidence. One rainy October evening, Daniel rode in the passenger seat while his best friend lost control of a car on a wet curve. The vehicle struck a utility pole. Daniel survived. His spinal cord injury did not reverse. For nearly 2 years, Emily watched her little brother battle the world. At first, he battled doctors, then therapists, then their parents, then strangers. Finally, he battled Emily. She remembered one afternoon with painful clarity. Daniel had thrown a glass across the kitchen because Emily tried to help him reach something. "I don't need you," he screamed. The glass shattered. Their mother started crying. Emily stood there trembling. Then she walked toward him. "You can hate the accident," she said. "You can hate the chair. You can hate every person who tells you to be grateful you survived, but you don't get to make everyone around you bleed because you're hurting." Daniel stared at her. For 3 days, he barely spoke. On the 4th morning, he apologized. Years later, he would tell Emily that she had been the first person after his accident who treated him like a man instead of a tragedy. Daniel eventually became a high school counselor. He married. He had a daughter. And whenever Emily became afraid of telling someone an uncomfortable truth, she remembered that broken glass. Margaret stopped outside a pair of dark wooden doors. "Mr. Whitmore is inside." "Richard." Margaret shook her head. "Ethan." Emily inhaled. Then she opened the doors. The room was enormous, paneled in dark walnut and lined with bookshelves. Morning sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. A man sat near the windows in a sleek black wheelchair. For a moment, Emily forgot every warning she had received. Ethan Whitmore looked younger than the magazine photographs she had seen online. His dark hair was slightly too long. His jaw was unshaven. He wore a charcoal sweater and black trousers. One hand rested against the wheel of his chair. The other held a coffee cup. He was staring outside. He did not turn around. "You're late." Emily looked at the clock mounted above the fireplace. 8:57 a.m. Her shift began at 9. "I'm 3 minutes early." Ethan took a sip of coffee. "Then you're aggressively punctual." Emily said nothing. Finally, he turned. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and exhausted. He studied her the way someone might inspect furniture being delivered. "You're smaller than the last one." Emily blinked. "Good morning to you too." Ethan smiled without warmth. That one had a sense of humor. "Did she?" "No, that's why she lasted 4 days." Emily placed her handbag on a chair. "My name is Emily Carter." "I know. I'd still prefer you use it." He tilted his head. "Do you?" "Yes." Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, perhaps. Or irritation. "Fine, Emily Carter, 31 years old, licensed practical nurse for 6 years, rehabilitation experience. No husband, no children, 1 speeding ticket when you were 24. Emily stared at him. "You ran a background check." "My father runs background checks." "You memorized it." "I was bored." Emily felt the first spark of anger. She suppressed it. "What would you like to do this morning?" "Fire you." "That isn't on my schedule." "It can be." "I believe your father hired me." Ethan looked back toward the window. "My father hires everyone." There was something underneath the words. Emily heard it. She did not understand it yet. A moment later, he pointed toward a silver tray on the table. My breakfast is cold. Emily looked. Eggs, toast, fruit, coffee. You already ate half of it. And the other half is cold. I can ask the kitchen to warm it. No. He pointed to the tray. You do it. Emily carried the plate to the adjoining kitchenette and reheated the food. When she returned, Ethan took one bite. Too hot. She stared at him. You asked me to warm it. I didn't ask you to cook it twice. Emily took the plate. She waited 30 seconds. Then returned it. He touched the eggs with his fork. Cold again. Margaret's warning echoed through her mind. Don't take it personally. Emily folded her arms. Are we actually trying to find the ideal temperature for scrambled eggs, or are you testing how long it takes me to become irritated? Ethan finally looked interested. Both. Good, now we're communicating. A tiny smile almost appeared, then vanished. At 10, Ethan insisted Emily accompany him to his father's study. Richard Whitmore stood behind an enormous desk, speaking into a phone. He was 63, silver-haired and immaculate, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than Emily's car. He glanced up. Emily, welcome. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Richard, please. Ethan rolled his eyes. Careful, he makes everyone feel like family right before asking them to sign a confidentiality agreement. Richard's smile tightened. Ethan. What? Emily sensed tension immediately. Not ordinary father and son tension. Something older. Deeper. Richard ended his call. I wanted to make sure everything was going smoothly. Perfectly, Ethan said. Emily has already mastered reheating eggs. Richard ignored him. Emily, my son's schedule is detailed in the file you received. Physical therapy Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Medical appointments as needed. He has complete independence in most daily activities, but father enjoys saying complete independence while paying someone to follow me from room to room. Richard's face hardened. You know why the arrangement exists. I know why you claim it exists. A silence followed. Emily looked from father to son. Richard changed the subject. We're hosting several board members for lunch. Ethan will join us. No, Ethan won't. Yes, you will. No. Richard's expression became colder. The announcement concerns the foundation. Ethan laughed bitterly. Of course it does. Emily felt suddenly invisible. Richard turned to her. Please make sure he is prepared by noon. Before she could respond, Ethan spoke. She's a caregiver, father, not a prison guard. Then he wheeled himself from the room. Emily followed. They returned to the library without speaking. At 11:30, Ethan finally said, blue shirt. Emily looked up. What? For lunch, apparently I'm being displayed. You can dress yourself. I know. Then why are you telling me? He pointed toward a wardrobe area beside the bedroom, adjoining the library. Bring me the blue shirt. Emily brought it. Ethan examined it. Wrong blue. There are 6 blue shirts. Then statistically, you had a 16% chance. Emily found another. Wrong. She brought a third. He smiled. Getting warmer. By the 5th shirt, Emily understood. He was enjoying this. She placed the shirt on the bed. You're doing this intentionally. Obviously. Why? Because you're being paid. To provide care. This is care. No, this is entertainment. His smile disappeared. Emily turned toward the door. Where are you going? To wait outside while you get dressed. I didn't dismiss you. Emily turned back. You don't dismiss me. His eyes narrowed. You work for my family. I work as your caregiver. Same thing. No, Ethan, it is. For several seconds, neither spoke. Emily walked outside. At noon, she accompanied him into the dining room. 6 executives sat around the table. Richard stood at the head. Everyone greeted Ethan too brightly. Emily recognized the tone. She had heard it countless times at the rehabilitation center. The voice people used when they were trying desperately not to acknowledge disability. Ethan recognized it too. His jaw tightened. Lunch began. Richard discussed the Whitmore Foundation, a charitable organization funding rehabilitation programs and adaptive technologies. The irony was obvious. The foundation had been created after Ethan's accident. His photograph appeared on brochures. His story opened fundraising videos. His tragedy had become part of the Whitmore corporate brand. Emily watched Ethan stare at his untouched lunch. Then Richard made the announcement. At next month's gala, Ethan will become the official chairman of the foundation. Applause erupted. Ethan did not move. Richard smiled. Ethan. Slowly, Ethan lifted his gaze. I wasn't aware. We discussed it. You discussed it. This is important. To whom? Richard lowered his voice. Not now. One executive attempted to rescue the conversation. It would be inspiring, Ethan. You've overcome extraordinary circumstances. Something changed in Ethan's face. Emily saw it immediately. The word inspiring had landed like an insult. Ethan smiled. Have I? The executive looked uncomfortable. Well, yes. What exactly have I overcome? Silence. Ethan gestured toward his wheelchair. This. No, I didn't mean. You did. Richard placed his napkin down. Enough. Ethan turned toward Emily. Come here. She remained standing near the wall. I'm fine here. I said come here. Every eye turned toward her. Emily approached cautiously. Ethan looked down at his expensive black shoe. There's something on it. Emily followed his gaze. A tiny drop of sauce. Napkin is beside you. I want you to clean it. Emily stared at him. The room went silent. Richard frowned. Ethan. What? She's my caregiver. Emily understood instantly. This was not about the shoe. Not really. Ethan had been humiliated by his father. By the announcement. By the executives. By being transformed into someone else's inspirational story. And now he was trying to hand that humiliation to someone beneath him. Pain moving downhill. She had seen it before. At home. In hospitals. In families. In herself. Ethan leaned back. You heard me, Emily. Richard looked embarrassed. Please excuse my son. No, Ethan said, don't excuse me, let her do her job. Emily reached for the cloth napkin beside his plate. A satisfied expression appeared on Ethan's face. Then she placed the napkin directly in his hand. There. His expression changed. Excuse me. You can reach your shoe. The executives stared. Richard stood. Emily. She looked at Ethan, not Richard. If you genuinely need assistance, I'll help you. If you're in pain, I'll sit with you. If you're angry, you can tell me. But I will not crawl on the floor so you can feel powerful in front of an audience. No one breathed. Ethan's face went pale. You're fired. That may be. Emily removed the employee badge clipped to her blouse. But before I leave, someone should tell you something. Ethan's eyes burned. Emily placed the badge on the table. Your wheelchair doesn't make you small. She paused. Treating people like they're beneath you does. Richard's mouth opened. Emily continued before he could interrupt. I had a brother who used a wheelchair. He spent 2 years believing his accident gave him permission to punish everyone who still had the life he lost. It didn't, neither does yours. Ethan stared at her. She expected rage. Instead, for one brief second, she saw something else. Fear. Then she turned toward Richard. I apologize for the disruption. She picked up her handbag and walked out. Margaret caught up with her in the foyer. What happened? I lasted 3 hours. Margaret's eyes widened. That may be a record. Despite everything, Emily laughed. Then she stepped outside. Behind her, somewhere deep inside that enormous mansion, a glass shattered. Emily did not hear it. But Margaret did. And as she later told Emily, Ethan had not thrown it. He had simply been holding it too tightly when it broke in his hand. Emily drove halfway home before her phone rang. Unknown number. She ignored it. It rang again. Then again. Finally, she answered. Hello. Richard Whitmore spoke. Ms. Carter. Emily gripped the steering wheel. If you're calling about the confidentiality agreement, I haven't told anyone anything. I'm calling about your job. I assume I no longer have one. There was a pause. My son does not have the authority to terminate your contract. Then you should give him that authority. He's 29. Richard sighed. You're not the first person he has treated badly. I guessed that around shirt number 4. To her surprise, Richard almost laughed. Then his voice became serious. You are the first person who responded the way you did. Emily said nothing. I'd like you to return tomorrow. Why? Because after you left, Ethan cancelled every meeting on his schedule. That sounds normal. He also asked Margaret for your personnel file. Emily frowned. That sounds less normal. And then he asked whether your brother was alive. Emily's grip tightened. Why? I don't know. She nearly refused. Every instinct told her that wealthy families could turn dysfunction into a full-time occupation for anyone unfortunate enough to enter their orbit. But then she remembered the look in Ethan's eyes after she told him his wheelchair did not make him small. Fear. Not anger. Fear. Against her better judgment, Emily returned the next morning. Ethan was in the library. There was a bandage around his palm. He did not greet her. She placed her bag down. Morning. Nothing. She looked at his hand. What happened? Glass. Did it attack you? He glanced at her. You're very irritating. I've been told. Silence. Then Ethan asked, your brother, what happened to him? Emily sat in the chair opposite him. Car accident. How long ago? 14 years. Complete injury. Thoracic. He walk again. No. Ethan looked toward the window. And he's happy. The question surprised her. Sometimes. Ethan frowned. Sometimes. He's married, has a daughter, works with teenagers, loves terrible action movies, complains about taxes, burns hamburgers every 4th of July. That doesn't answer my question. It does. Emily leaned forward. He isn't happy because he uses a wheelchair. He isn't unhappy because he uses one. He's a human being. His life contains both. Ethan looked away. You sound like a greeting card. And you sound like someone hopping, I'll say something depressing enough to prove you right. His eyes returned to her. For the first time, there was no mockery in them. Only exhaustion. My fiancé left 3 months after the accident. Emily stayed quiet. My friends visited for 6 months, then once a month, then birthdays, then texts. He gave a bitter smile. My father built a charity. That bothers you. He put my face on it. Emily understood. He turned your worst experience into a campaign. Ethan's gaze hardened. You really don't know when to stop talking. You asked. A long silence passed. Then Ethan surprised her. I'm sorry about yesterday. Emily blinked. For which part? He almost smiled. The shoe. That's a start. He looked at his hands. I wanted you to kneel. I know. Do you know why? Because your father made you feel powerless. His head snapped up. Emily continued. So you wanted to make someone else feel smaller. Ethan stared at her. She expected another explosion. Instead, he whispered, yes. That moment changed something between them. Not everything. Ethan remained difficult. He complained. He provoked. He used sarcasm like armor. But Emily stopped reacting to the armor. She responded to the man underneath it. When he skipped physical therapy, she did not lecture. She placed his jacket beside him. You're going. No. Okay. She sat down and began reading. 20 minutes passed. Ethan grew suspicious. Aren't you supposed to argue? No. Then why is my jacket there? In case you decide to stop behaving like a 13-year-old. He stared at her. 5 minutes later, he put it on. When he refused to leave the house for a week, Emily discovered an old photograph in a drawer. Ethan standing beside a sailboat. Sunburned. Laughing. Walking. She studied it. You sailed. Raced. Were you good? Very. Past tense. His eyes narrowed. I can't exactly scramble across a deck anymore. Emily placed the photograph down. That isn't what I asked. 2 weeks later, Ethan agreed to visit an adaptive sailing club. He sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes. Then demanded they leave. Emily started the car without criticism. The following Saturday, he asked to return. He stayed 20 minutes. The third time, he went onto the dock. The fourth, he boarded the boat. When the wind caught the sail and the boat leaned over the water, Emily watched something she had not seen before. Ethan laughed. Not politely. Not bitterly. He laughed from somewhere deep inside himself. Afterward, he sat on the dock staring at the water. My mother loved sailing. Emily had rarely heard him mention her. She died. Ethan nodded. When I was 23. I'm sorry. He stared across the harbor. She was in the car. Emily felt the air change. The accident. He nodded again. For weeks, she had assumed the crash had injured Ethan. She had never known it had killed someone. My father was supposed to drive her home, Ethan said. They had an argument, she called me. His voice became distant. It was raining. Emily waited. I was angry when I arrived, angry at him, angry at her for calling me. I drove too fast. He swallowed. A truck crossed the center line. Emily watched his hands tighten against the wheels. I remember the headlights. His voice cracked. I remember my mother screaming my name. Emily said nothing. I woke up 7 days later. He stared at the water. Her funeral had already happened. The words sat between them. Heavy. Unmovable. My father never said it was my fault, Ethan continued. But you think it was. I know it was. You said a truck crossed the center line. I was speeding. That doesn't mean. I was speeding. Several people turned toward them. Ethan lowered his voice. If I had been going slower, maybe I could have stopped. Maybe. He stared at her. Emily did not soften the word. Maybe you could have, maybe you couldn't have, but you've been sentencing yourself for 6 years based on a question nobody can answer. His eyes filled with anger. You weren't there. No. You don't know. No. He turned his wheelchair toward the parking lot. Emily followed. That night, Margaret told her something else. After the accident, Ethan had refused to attend his mother's memorial service held by the company. He had not attended a Whitmore Foundation gala. He had not appeared publicly at any corporate events. Richard told newspapers his son was protecting his privacy. The truth was simpler. Ethan believed he deserved to disappear. Emily began noticing evidence everywhere. Family photographs that ended 6 years earlier. A piano nobody played. A locked upstairs room. His mother's gardening gloves still hanging inside the greenhouse. The mansion was not merely a home. It was a museum of the life Ethan believed he had destroyed. And Richard, in his own way, was trapped there too. One afternoon, Emily found him alone in the greenhouse. Richard was staring at a dying rosebush. You were right about him, he said. About what? I made him feel powerless. Emily hesitated. You love him. Desperately. That doesn't mean you understand him. Richard gave a tired smile. You have a talent for saying unpleasant things calmly. I learned from my mother. Richard touched one of the rose leaves. My wife Catherine planted these. Emily waited. After she died, I nearly lost Ethan too. His voice lowered. Doctors told me to prepare myself. For a second, the billionaire disappeared. There was only a father standing beside his dead wife's roses. When he woke up, I promised myself I would never lose him. Emily looked toward the mansion. So you control everything. Richard closed his eyes. Yes. His doctors, his staff, his schedule. Yes. His foundation. Richard turned. The foundation saves lives. I'm not questioning the work. Then what? I'm questioning whether you built it for other people or because you couldn't save your wife. Richard stared at her. Emily immediately wondered if she had gone too far. Then Richard whispered, both. A month passed. Then another. Ethan changed gradually. He stopped sending food back just to irritate the kitchen staff. He learned the names of 2 new employees. He apologized to Margaret for shouting at her. One morning, Emily found a handwritten card beside Margaret's coffee. It said only, I know you stayed when everyone else left, thank you. Margaret cried in the pantry. But the biggest change came 6 weeks before the foundation gala. Richard presented Ethan with the speech prepared for him. Ethan read the first paragraph. then threw it onto the desk. I'm not saying this. Richard sighed. We've revised it 3 times. It calls me an example of courage. You are. No, I'm rich. Richard froze. Ethan continued. I had the best surgeons in the country, a house redesigned before I left rehabilitation, equipment most patients never see, therapy 7 days a week. He looked at Emily. She worked in a rehabilitation center where people lost coverage before they finished treatment. Richard looked uncomfortable. That is precisely why the foundation exists. Then talk about them. I want you to talk about your experience. My experience isn't their experience. Emily remained silent. This was Ethan's fight, not hers. Richard folded his arms. You agreed to attend. I agreed to attend. I didn't agree to become your inspirational exhibit. Richard's face tightened. The old argument was returning. Then Ethan did something neither expected. He picked up the speech. I'll speak. Richard relaxed slightly. But I write it. A long pause. Fine. And nobody edits it. Ethan. Then I don't go. Richard looked toward Emily. She raised both hands. Don't involve me. For the first time, father and son laughed at the same moment. The sound was small. But Emily remembered it. Because 3 days later, everything nearly collapsed. Ethan received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a photograph taken at the accident scene 6 years earlier. The wrecked car. Emergency lights. Rain. And a newspaper clipping about Catherine Whitmore's death. Across the clipping, someone had written, "She would still be alive if you hadn't been driving." Emily found Ethan in the library. The curtains were closed. His phone lay shattered on the floor. The wheelchair sat beside the sofa. Ethan had transferred himself onto the cushions and was staring into darkness. Emily picked up the photograph. His face hardened. Put it down. She did. Who sent it? I don't know. Have you told your father? No. You should. No. Ethan. Get out. Emily stayed. Get out. No. His eyes flashed. You're an employee. There he is. What? The man who asked me to clean his shoe. His face twisted. Don't. He shows up whenever you're terrified. I said get out. And I said no. He grabbed a glass from the table. Emily watched his hand. For one horrifying second, she remembered Daniel. The kitchen. The flying glass. Her mother crying. But Ethan did not throw it. He held it. Then slowly placed it down. His shoulders collapsed. I killed her. Emily sat on the floor several feet away. No. I killed her. The truck crossed the center line. I was speeding. You made a mistake. She died because of it. You don't know that. I do. Emily's voice rose. And if she were standing here right now, do you think she would want the accident to kill you too? Ethan froze. Emily's throat tightened. Because that's what you've been doing. He stared at her. You survived the crash, Ethan. Her voice softened. But you've been dying inside that house ever since. He looked away. Emily continued. You punish your father because he survived. You punish yourself because you survived. You pushed away every caregiver because somewhere inside you, you decided anyone who stayed close enough would eventually leave or die. Ethan's breathing changed. That isn't. Yes, it is. His eyes filled. You don't know anything about me. I know you kept your mother's sailing gloves. He went still. I know you visit the greenhouse at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep. His lips parted. I know you still have the voicemail she left asking you to pick her up that night. He stared at her. Emily had accidentally heard it once when Ethan fell asleep with his phone playing old recordings. Catherine's cheerful voice. Ethan, darling, if you're not busy, could you come get me? Your father is being impossible. Emily's eyes burned. You listen to that voicemail because you think hearing her voice is punishment. Ethan's face crumpled. It happened quietly. No dramatic collapse. No scream. He simply covered his face and cried. For 6 years, Ethan Whitmore had apparently learned how to endure surgeries, reporters, pity, nightmares, and guilt. But he had never learned how to grieve. Emily remained on the floor. She did not touch him. She did not tell him everything would be okay. She simply stayed. After several minutes, Ethan lowered his hands. His voice was barely audible. What am I supposed to do? Emily looked at him. Stop turning your mother's death into your life sentence. How? Start by telling the truth. About what? Everything. That evening, Ethan handed the anonymous letter to his father. Security eventually discovered it had been sent by a former Whitmore employee seeking money. But the letter itself had already done what its sender intended. It reopened the wound. The difference was that this time Ethan did not hide it. He began seeing a trauma therapist. Not because Richard scheduled one. Because Ethan chose one. He returned to sailing. He started reviewing the Foundation's programs. Then he discovered something that disturbed him. The Foundation spent millions on rehabilitation technology, but comparatively little on home modifications, transportation, long-term caregiving, employment assistance, or the mundane expenses that determined whether disabled adults could actually live independently. One evening, Ethan placed a stack of documents in front of Emily. You were right. Emily looked up. She grinned. You'll have to narrow that down. He ignored her. We fund innovation because innovation photographs well. She flipped through the reports. And we are going to change it. We, the Foundation. Emily stuttered him. What does your father think? He doesn't know. That sounds promising. Ethan smiled. I'm proposing an independent living initiative at the gala. How much? $50 million. Emily nearly dropped the papers. Ethan, over 5 years. That is still $50 million. I checked. She stared at him. Where will it come from? My trust distributions. Emily slowly closed the folder. You're donating your own money. Some of it. Some. He shrugged. I have an offensive amount. Emily laughed. Then her expression softened. Why? Ethan looked toward the window. Because 6 years ago, I thought independence meant walking. He glanced at his wheelchair. I was wrong. The night of the gala arrived. 800 guests filled the grand ballroom of a Manhattan hotel. Business leaders, actors, politicians, doctors, journalists. The event was being streamed online. Emily stood backstage while Ethan adjusted his cuffs. He wore a black tuxedo. His hands were trembling. Nervous, she asked. No. You're lying. Yes. Richard approached. For once, he did not look like a billionaire. He looked like a father. "You don't have to do this," he told Ethan. Ethan looked up. "Yes, I do." Richard nodded. Then, awkwardly, he placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm proud of you." Ethan swallowed. "For what?" "For coming." The stage manager signaled. Ethan rolled toward the curtain, then stopped. He turned to Emily. "Remember my first day with you?" "Unfortunately, I tried to make you kneel." "Yes, you could have left." "I did leave." "You came back." Emily smiled. "You asked about my brother." Ethan nodded. "That was why." "That was why." The announcer introduced him. Thunderous applause filled the ballroom. Ethan looked terrified. Emily leaned closer. "Tell the truth." He rolled onto the stage. For several seconds, he said nothing. 800 people waited. Then Ethan looked down at the prepared notes. He pushed them aside. "My name is Ethan Whitmore." The room quieted. "Most of you know me as the son of Richard Whitmore. Some of you know me because of a car accident 6 years ago. And many of you know my photograph because this foundation has used it to raise a great deal of money." Nervous laughter. Richard watched from backstage. "For years, people called me brave simply because I survived." Ethan paused. "I hated them for it." The room became still. "I wasn't brave." He looked toward Emily. "I was angry." Then toward his father. "I was cruel." Richard's eyes lowered. "I treated people who cared for me as if their kindness made them weak. I mistook humiliation for control." Emily felt tears gathering. Ethan continued. "Then someone came into my house and refused to let me use my pain as an excuse to hurt her." A murmur moved through the audience. "She reminded me of something I had forgotten." He placed both hands on his wheels. "This chair does not diminish my dignity." He paused. "And it does not increase it." The silence deepened. "My dignity comes from being human, so does yours." Richard slowly sat down. "And if that is true, then dignity cannot belong only to people who can afford it." Ethan explained the initiative. Accessible housing grants, transportation assistance, home care subsidies, employment programs, emergency support for families. Then he announced his personal $50 million commitment. The audience gasped. Richard stared at him. But Ethan was not finished. "I am also asking the Whitmore Foundation to match my contribution." Every head backstage turned toward Richard. Emily nearly laughed. Ethan had not mentioned that part. All eyes shifted to his father. Richard stood motionless. Then he smiled. He walked onto the stage. Ethan watched him approach. Richard took the second microphone. "My son enjoys surprising me." Laughter swept through the ballroom. Richard looked at Ethan. "For several years, I believed protecting him meant controlling every variable around him." He swallowed. "I was wrong." Then he faced the audience. "The Whitmore Foundation will match his $50 million." The audience erupted. $100 million. Ethan closed his eyes. But Richard raised a hand. "And Whitmore Industries will add another $25 million over 5 years for employment initiatives." Ethan stared at his father. Richard leaned toward him. "You're not the only Whitmore allowed to make dramatic announcements." For the first time in 6 years, father and son embraced in public. The photograph appeared around the world the next morning. But the photograph Emily treasured was never published. Margaret had taken it backstage. Ethan was laughing. Richard was beside him. Emily stood behind them. And nobody in the picture looked like a billionaire, a caregiver, a grieving husband, or a man in a wheelchair. They looked like people. Just people. 6 months later, Emily's contract expired. Ethan called her into the library. A familiar silver breakfast tray sat on the table. She eyed it suspiciously. "If you complain about the temperature of those eggs, I'm leaving." Ethan smiled. "I reheated them myself." "Growth." "Zit." Emily sat. He handed her an envelope. She opened it. Inside was a job offer. Director of Patient Advocacy. Whitmore Foundation. Emily stared at the salary. Then looked again. "There's an extra 0. "No. Ethan. You'll earn it. I'm a nurse. You're also terrifying. That isn't a qualification." "It should be." Emily laughed. Then she saw another document beneath the offer. A handwritten note. "My mother used to tell me that the people who love us most are not always the people who make us comfortable. Sometimes they are the people who refuse to let us become someone we were never meant to be. Thank you for refusing to kneel." Emily read it twice. When she looked up, Ethan was staring out the window. "You know," she said, "you still haven't apologized for the blue shirts. There were 6, you chose badly. 5 times. Statistically impressive." She threw the envelope at him. He laughed. And something about the sound made Emily remember her first morning in the mansion. The cold room. The bitter man near the window. The warning from Margaret. "Whatever he says, don't take it personally." Emily had entered that house believing her responsibility was to help Ethan Whitmore live with a wheelchair. She eventually discovered that the wheelchair had never been the thing preventing him from living. Guilt had. Grief had. Fear had. And so had the people who loved him so desperately that they protected him from every difficult truth. A year later, Ethan stood, or rather, sat, before another audience at the opening of the first Whitmore Independent Living Center. Daniel Carter was there. Emily had invited him. When Ethan met Daniel, the two men stared at each other for several seconds. Daniel finally grinned. "So you're the rich jerk who tried to make my sister clean your shoe." Ethan looked at Emily. "You told him." "She tells me everything," Daniel said. Ethan sighed. "Wonderful." Daniel leaned closer. "Want some advice? Do I have a choice?" "No." Daniel pointed toward Emily. "Never make her angry when she's holding coffee." Ethan nodded solemnly. "I learned that in week 3. Emily shook her head. Watching them laugh, she thought about how easily things could have ended differently. She could have cleaned the shoe. She could have swallowed the humiliation because she needed the money. She could have told herself rich men were allowed to behave differently. Or she could have walked away forever after Ethan fired her. Instead, she had done something far simpler. She had treated him as an equal. Equal enough to challenge. Equal enough to anger. Equal enough to forgive. And eventually, equal enough to trust. That evening, after the center opened, Ethan wheeled himself outside. Children were playing beside the fountain. Parents spoke with counselors. A young woman in a wheelchair was meeting an employment advisor. A father was learning that the foundation would help install a ramp at his home. Ethan watched silently. Emily joined him. "Worth $50 million?" she asked. He smiled. Ask me again when I'm 80. You'll complain about the eggs. Obviously. They watched the families. Then Ethan said, do you ever think about that first day? Yes. I hated you. I know. I hated that you weren't afraid of me. I was afraid. He looked surprised. You were. Of course. Then why did you say all that? Emily thought about Daniel. The broken glass. Her mother crying. A 16-year-old boy who thought a wheelchair had stolen his future. She thought about her father, who used to tell her courage was rarely the absence of fear. Usually, he said, courage was deciding something mattered more. Because sometimes, Emily said, respect means refusing to participate in someone's destruction. Ethan looked toward the building bearing his mother's name. CATHEIN-WHITMORE, Independent Living CNTR. His eyes glistened. I think she would have liked you. Emily smiled. I think she would have been furious about the speeding. Ethan laughed through his tears. Definitely. He looked at the sign again. For years, Ethan had believed honoring his mother meant carrying the weight of her death. Now he understood something different. Perhaps the dead were not honored by destroying what remained of the living. Perhaps love was not measured by how long a person suffered after losing someone. Perhaps guilt could wear the disguise of loyalty. And perhaps forgiveness was not forgetting what happened. It was finally allowing tomorrow to exist. Ethan reached into his jacket. He removed the anonymous clipping someone had mailed him months earlier. Emily stared. You kept it? Yes. Why? He unfolded it. The words were still there. She would still be alive if you hadn't been driving. For months, he had carried the clipping. Not as punishment anymore. As a reminder. Ethan tore it once. Then again. And again. The pieces fell into a nearby trash bin. Emily said nothing. Neither did Ethan. Some moments did not need speeches. Behind them, the doors to the center opened. People moved in and out. Wheelchairs. Crutches. Prosthetics. Parents. Children. Caregivers. Doctors. Workers. Lives continuing. Ethan watched them. Then he pushed his wheels forward. Not away from the world this time. Toward it. And Emily walked beside him. Not ahead. Not behind. Beside him. Exactly where she had always believed she belonged. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, remember its message. Pain can explain cruelty, but it should never become permission to destroy the dignity of others. Real compassion does not mean accepting humiliation, and real love sometimes requires the courage to tell someone a truth they do not want to hear. Ethan's wheelchair was never his greatest prison. His guilt, anger, and refusal to forgive himself were. Emily did not change his life by pitying him. She changed it by respecting him enough to hold him accountable. If you believe people living with disabilities deserve dignity rather than pity, that caregivers deserve respect rather than humiliation, and that wounded people can still choose healing over bitterness, kindly subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us continue sharing meaningful stories about courage, compassion, forgiveness, justice, and the extraordinary difference one person can make when they refuse to look away. And in the comments, tell us, was Emily right to stand up to Ethan on her very first day, even though it could have cost her the job?